Hi, everyone.
Hello.
My name's Victoria. I use she, her, hers, and I am a field organizer here at the National LGBTQ Task Force.
And I am Megan Morey. I am the policy director here at the National LGBTQ Task Force. And I just noticed it's kind of embarrassing. We're wearing the same shirt. We didn't think this through.
Oh, I think we did think it through,
and
it was purposely planned.
They're pretty great.
So we are today wearing our matching BU Be Counted shirts because we are kicking off our Equity Week here at the task force with Equity is the Census. So we're going to be talking about some census facts today.
So exciting.
Megan is an avid census advocate.
Also known as a census nerd.
In Megan's words. So we have some questions for you, Megan, today. First of all, let's just get down to the basics. Like, what is the census? So, yeah. I've personally never had to fill out a census before. Sure. I am young. The last census was in 2010, and I was a junior in high school, and so I was still living at home with my family, and my parents filled out the census. And the only thing I can really remember my parents talking about was the number of people in the household, and that's all I knew about the census back then.
That's still a lot more than a lot of people know, so you were doing great. I have gotten to fill out a census. I am 40 years old. I'm in my 40s. So I got to fill out my own census a couple times now. And basically what the census is every 10 years, the federal government does a count of every single person in the United States. And they do it for a number of reasons. They do it to basically figure out where to put financial resources into communities. So they're trying to figure out how to share out our tax money, basically, to states for programs like SNAP or food stamps, Medicaid, public housing, but even things like where to situate roads, how many street lights we need to have, how many hospitals we need in a community. The census helps us figure out things like that by just doing a count of every person in the country. It also helps us figure out how many representatives each state should have, or how many representatives you should have in a state for each community. By counting every single person in the country, we can make sure that roughly an equal number of people are represented by each representative.
Okay, cool. So federal funding, federal and state funding, and the number of House representatives that you get. So when you're voting on your House representatives and things like that, that's all determined by the census.
Yes.
I have also heard you talk about the census as a tool for enforcing civil rights.
Yes.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So the U.S. government does the census for these two purposes, primarily for representation and federal funding, but we use the data for a lot of other purposes, right? So we use the data as advocates to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our communities, to make sure that we're allocating our resources as an organization to the places that need it most, right? But we also use the census data to enforce civil rights protections. We know that it is against the law to discriminate in things like housing, employment, public accommodations on the basis of race, ethnicity, and other protected classes like religion.
Right.
But if someone's not, if we want to show that there's like a pattern or a practice of discrimination, right? So if an employment policy is discriminating against people of color, for example, we have to be able to show the statistics that show that people of color are being treated differently than white people, right?
Okay.
So the census actually gives us that data that we need to enforce those civil rights protections in cases that are about sort of that the way policy impacts folks.
Right. So when lawmakers say like, how is this not just an isolated incident versus like a pattern?
Right.
We use the census data to be able to do that.
The census does some cool stuff.
It really does. Why is it important for LGBTQ people specifically? I don't think there is a question about sexual orientation or gender identity. Is that correct? Are we even counted on the census?
Yes. Okay, so excellent questions.
Okay.
The census is important for us as people, right? LGBTQ people are more likely to be living in poverty, more likely to need access to programs like SNAP, WIC, Medicaid, public housing. So as individuals, it's really critical for us to be part of that counting process so that the right number of resources are coming to our communities to meet our needs as queer and trans folks, right?
Okay.
So it is really, really important for us to be a part of the census count. But you're absolutely right that there's not a specific question about sexual orientation or gender identity on the census.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on it. We've been working on it since about 1990. The task force in particular, but also tons of other LGBTQ organizations have been fighting to get the Census Bureau, the federal government, to include sexual orientation and gender identity questions in the census and other big surveys, right?
Yeah.
Because we need that data. We need that data to advocate better. We need that data to make sure that our people are getting what they need. We need that data to enforce our civil rights, right?
Okay.
But in the meantime, it's still important for us to fill out the census so that we can be part of the allocation of resources in general as people.
Right.
And one interesting and kind of exciting thing for the 2020 census is that there actually is a question. There's a question called the relationship to householder question. It is a fancy name.
Official.
I know, it's very fancy. But basically what it is that everyone in the household says, this is my relationship to the person who's filling out this form. And in that relationship question, you can actually mark in 2020 whether you're in a same-sex married couple or a same-sex unmarried couple, different sex married couple, different sex unmarried couple. And that is going to allow us to get really easy access to data about same-sex couples. Now that is just a sliver of the LGBTQ community.
Right, because not all queer couples live together.
Right, totally. And not all queer people are in relationships. And it doesn't get us any data at all about trans folks. So it is just a small sliver of our community, but it still provides data about same-sex couples that we can use in advocacy and at least helps us there. And there's a little bit of ways that we can do some cross-tabbing with other data that's available to get broader information about our community by kind of comparing across different data elements on the census.
Okay, so even though there isn't a question specifically about sexual orientation or gender identity, you can still use the census data along with data we do have specifically about LGBTQ people.
To at least get a little bit better information about folks. Yeah.
And I have heard that there are a lot of LGBTQ people who fear having the question, a sexual orientation and gender identity question on the census because they fear being outed to the government. We're in a Trump administration that is very scary and has been attacking the LGBTQ community in multiple ways. And not just the LGBTQ community. I've heard a lot of fears around a lot of questions. Specifically, there's the citizenship question that may or may not end up being on the census this year. Can you speak to these fears that people have?
Yeah, absolutely. And we hear that a lot. I go around the country talking about census all the time. All I do is talk about the census. I'm a census person. I'm a census nerd. But that is a really common concern that folks have, and it's legitimate. Historically, the U.S. government in our living memory has used the census data in really pretty horrifying ways. In the World War II, they used census data to sort of round up and intern Japanese Americans, right? This is in our living memory. But the good news is after that happened, the laws around census data confidentiality were strengthened immensely. And right now it's really incredibly closely held information. The Census Bureau can't share information even to other federal agencies, never mind to the public about you as a person.
Yeah.
That doesn't totally erase the fear for folks, right? There's still someone who's going to be looking at your data, and that feels frightening for people. And I don't want to take that away. That is absolutely frightening. But in a systemic sense, it's helpful to know that the information cannot be shared between agencies. So I know, a lot of folks had concerns about, is this data going to be shared from the Census Bureau to ICE?
Exactly.
Or even the Census Bureau to DOJ, which we know has been really central in a lot of the anti-LGBTQ work that's been happening in this government. And the answer is no. The Census Bureau can't share that data with any other federal agency, and the penalties for that are pretty harsh. So we have some confidence that it's that they will adhere to that. But we will definitely be putting out more information between now and Census 2020 so that people really understand what the law is, know what their rights are, know what it means if you don't answer a question on the census or if you don't answer the form at all. So we'll be sure to really fill in the details of that for folks over the next year so that people feel armed with the knowledge that they need to have to participate.
And some people will, if you don't fill out the census, census folks will be coming and knocking on your door, right?
Yeah.
And so people, in relation to the citizenship question, don't have to worry that it's an ICE agent coming knocking.
Yeah. So I mean, and again, we'll make sure that everybody has the details on this as time goes forward. But basically what the process is the Census Bureau sends out mailers to everybody in March of 2020 and says, hey, go fill out the census. You can fill it out online. You can fill it out on paper. You can fill it out by phone. And they encourage everyone to self-respond is what they call it. If you self-respond, they're like, cool, done with you. Don't have to think about you anymore. Sure. But for folks who don't fill out the census, they actually send folks door to door and they say, hey, can you fill out the census? And they can help you at the door or get you to go online to fill it out. And we call those folks enumerators. It's another fancy term. But those enumerators come out between like June and they come out in June and July to people's houses if they have not already filled out the census.
Okay. And these are people who are employed by the Census Bureau.
Right. Yeah. And we'll be sure also around that time to make sure that we're putting out into public how you can recognize whether someone is an enumerator or just some stranger knocking at your door so that there's not those fears that you're opening the door to someone who either shouldn't have your data, period, or maybe is from another agency.
Yeah. And is the task force doing anything about the census?
Well, we made these fancy shirts, so that's one. But yes, we'll be convening a coalition with our friends over at the Center for American Progress to make sure that LGBTQ organizations have all the materials and resources and information they need to engage, so that it can get out to even more folks across the country. We will be putting together a bunch of sort of like fact sheets and information sheets, FAQs, answering everybody's questions about everything census, both in things like this, Facebook Lives, but also on written materials, so that's stuff that people can share within their networks.
Right.
Yeah.
Public education.
I know, it's so exciting.
Yes. We're doing a lot of cool things.
I know.
Thank you so much for sharing.
The shirts are just the start.
Yes. And if we have any questions from the Facebook audience, I would love to open it up to anybody on Facebook to share a question.
So we've got two questions. The first actually has to do with the t-shirts. Stacy Long Simmons wants to know how they can get one.
That is such a great question. We may have to loop back to you, Facebook, on that. I do want to show off, though, that they also have a back. What? So cool. They're basically the best shirts of all time. The best shirts. And my guess is what you need to do is contact our colleague, Andy, who can get a shirt out to you. But we'll be sure to post in the comments how to get access to one of those shirts.
We have another question from Thaisa. They ask, how do we get involved and what can we do to get people to fill out the census?
Such a good question. Oh my goodness. Well, so there's a ton of different ways to get involved, both at the sort of like individual level, but also organizational level, community level. So every state and many localities, or most states, there's a couple of states that don't have them, and many localities have something called a complete count committee that is kind of like a coalition table of folks who are trying to make sure that everyone in their state gets counted. Those are plugging along, doing great work right now, and you can be a part of it. it is easy to access information about those on the Census Bureau's website. But there's also regional offices you can contact to get more involved there. So that exists as an infrastructure for people to organize and get involved. But there's also sort of different ways for you to get involved. I think one really great way to get involved is just for you to pledge to fill out the census. Really, that is the most critical thing you can do to be part of the census advocacy. And we know that one of the best motivators for other folks to fill out the census is to have a conversation with someone that they trust, right? So if you really want to be a census advocate, a census champion, you can by pledging to get 5 of your friends to also fill out the census by having conversations with them about why the census is important. And if you are like a census super champion, you will pledge to get 5 of your friends to pledge to get 5 of their friends to fill out the census, and you will have changed the world.
It's a ripple effect.
It is.
Spread the word.
Is there another question online?
Yes. Sarah asked, when is the web series on All About the Census with Megan and guests coming out?
As long as it includes Victoria King, I am there. That is basically what's going to happen.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to us about the census. It at first can be a very, I'm going to be honest, a very boring thing to talk about.
No.
But you do make it very exciting. And I'm converted. The census is so cool.
Yes. The census is so cool.
If you have any other questions, you can check out our website, queerthecensus.org, for more information about how to get involved and what the census is. We have fact sheets up that you can download. There is a fact sheet about LGBTQ people and the census federally. And then we'll also have state-specific fact sheets about LGBTQ people and the census.
You know what else is up there?
Oh, I don't know. You tell me.
I will tell you. Is a statement from folks in the National Religious Leadership Roundtable about how the census is a moral document.
Okay.
And it sort of expresses their opinions and feelings about how the citizenship question is gonna harm participation in the census. It's really moving. I really urge you to check it out if you haven't already.
I really like that. It's called that they're calling it a moral document. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Facebook audience. This has been great. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did in learning about the census. Please join us tomorrow at 4 for Equity is Housing.